What up, my friends? Welcome back to my channel. Today we have a bonus video for you today, and that is my book wrap up for the month of March. These are all of the books that I read in the month of March. I read a total of 13 books. In this video, I'll be going over my thoughts. I'll give a little summary, but I never give spoilers, so don't worry about that. So I provide a rating for both the stars and how much I enjoyed the book, and then also the spice level if it's a romance. That way, if you're not comfortable with spice, you kind of have an idea where it's at before heading into the book. I don't have any fancy system when it comes to rating either of those categories. It's just kind of what I felt like when I walked away from the book. So there's that. Now, in this video, there are going to be a few books that actually have not released yet. Because I have a book Instagram, also known as Bookstagram, I do sign up for opportunities to be able to get a book prior to the release date in exchange for an honest review. So if the book has not released yet, I'll be sure to mention it to you. I don't hang my hat on any of those authors sending me books, and I would never allow my integrity to be reduced in some way just because they're sending me a book a few months before the release date. You know what I'm saying? So if I give a review on a book that I was sent, it doesn't affect me. I'm giving my honest review. The words are 100% mine. And speaking of the Bookstagram, if you want to, you can follow me over there. I usually do, right now I'm doing between like 3 and 5 reviews a week that I'm sharing. I dip into books that I've read recently, as well as like my catalog of books from my GoodReads account from prior to having a Bookstagram. So I'm generally sharing a good amount of books over there. On there, I also share some templates for content. So if you happen to also have a Bookstagram or just like to share what you're reading, I do have templates for like currently reading, book challenges, favorites of the year, things like that. All right, let's just jump into the books that I read. So first up was Bride or Die by Madison Score. This one I gave a 4 out of 5 on the stars and 0.5 out of 5 on the spice. There wasn't any like explicit scenes, but there were some explicit things discussed. So I just didn't want somebody who wants like a clean closed door book to walk in thinking there's no spice. There's a teeny hint of it. This one's like a cozy mystery meets romance. It was more on the cozy mystery side than the romance. This one follows Claire, who's an established planner in her area specializing in proposals. Well, one of her college roommates ends up going missing, and she starts to realize she herself could be in danger and wants to try and figure out what's going on. So this book is super cozy. When it comes to cozy mystery, it's definitely very cozy. I felt the writing in terms of describing the scenes and the characters and everything was done really well. I also loved Claire because she had a clumsy awkwardness to her that didn't get cringy. And that's always like, I feel like a fine line for authors. There were a few topics in this book that I didn't appreciate jokes being made of. I know the author like came out and basically said she wrote this book like 10 years ago and she's grown more as a person, but I just feel like even though it was written 10 years ago, it could have been edited and updated and, you know, made better now. So I do want to just call that out because I didn't appreciate it. I'm not a super sensitive person, but I just felt like it was a little icky and unnecessary because it didn't aid to the plot in any way. But I loved the mystery aspect. I felt like it was really fun. It was really intriguing. The twist at the end ended up being something I don't think anybody could have expected. I'm interested to see where she goes from here. The next one that I read, oh my god, you guys, this one like took my soul away. It was called The Naabs Daughter by Jess Heilman, and I never know if I'm saying her name correct. I should probably look it up so I can stop being a jerk. This was a 5-star read for me. 5-star read. And no spice in this one. It's a clean romance. It's a historical romance. Regency is the setting, so think kind of like Bridgerton type vibes. This one follows Honora, who is very involved in her father's business, even though that was a little unusual for the times. So she is shocked to find out that he has arranged for her marriage in England and is shipping her off back to where she was born. She has pretty much grown up in India and she feels that's where her heart and soul belong, so she is determined to make sure that this marriage does not work out. When I read a book like this, I'm reminded why I love reading so much, and that's because I just was able to be completely swept away in a story. Every emotion was brought out of me in this book. There was anger, there was frustration, there was sadness, there was happiness, there was like this overwhelming feeling of being involved in like a romance because it got so swoony towards the end. It was so well done. The pacing on it was exquisite. The way that she takes you through the story, it like builds basically. And I don't know how more people aren't talking about this author. So This is available on Kindle Unlimited if you happen to have Kindle Unlimited. If not, please support her and please go check out this book, because I am shocked that more people are not talking about it. The writing is absolutely beautiful. And I have read now, I think 3 of her books. I read a Christmas book from her. I also read a book called Abigail by her earlier this year, which was one of my favorites this year. And now this one just completely took me away. The next book was provided to me by the author and publisher ahead of the release date in exchange for an honest review. This one was called Summer Romance by Annabelle Monaghan. If you haven't read Annabelle Monaghan, oh my gosh, do yourself a favor and go pick up her other books before this one releases. But this one releases on June 4th, 2024. I gave it a 4.5 stars out of 5 for my rating, and then for Spice, it's clean, closed-door romance, so 0 out of 5 on Spice. So this one follows Allie, who's a professional organizer, and she lost her mother fairly recently and is still going through the stages of grief when her husband announces that he wants a divorce. She is convinced that she's never going to want to date again. However, she ends up stumbling into a man that looks at her the way that she's always dreamed somebody would, and they decide to embark on a summer romance knowing that their lives are just not in the same place. Annabelle Monaghan, I swear, she is such a special writer. She does something where she takes very ordinary, very everyday stories and just sucks you completely into them. I never want to leave the pages of her books. There's just something so intoxicating about them. But like I said, they're like an ordinary story, so they're incredibly relatable. It feels like something that could happen to you. I also love the maturity of her characters. There is a little bit of angst always in her books, but not enough to take away from the maturity factor and not enough to make you like frustrated with them. I felt like in this book, the romance was done really, really well, but even more so, the journey that Allie, the main character, goes on was done even better. It's a very healing book, I felt like. The way that grief is discussed and the way that she rebuilds her life in a very authentic way. It didn't feel like anybody was ever putting on a show or doing things that is like the most ideal way to handle things. She didn't handle things in the most ideal way, which I thought was incredibly refreshing. I think a lot of the topics that are discussed are topics that are universal to a lot of us. So I think that like I said, it's a very relatable book. There are definitely some dry spots in it. So that's why it's not a full 5-star for me, because there were a few spots that I just kind of was like getting through the motions on those sections. It's definitely one that I would recommend, and I would recommend anything from Annabelle Monaghan. I've read all of her books now that are available to be read, and she's just phenomenal. The next one is another book that I got sent in exchange for my honest review, and this was Savor It by Tara DeWitt. This one releases May 21st, 2024. This one I gave 4.5 stars out of 5, and for Spice I gave a 1 out of 5. Tara DeWitt is another author that I don't hear talked about enough. I seriously don't. She writes amazingly witty rom-coms. Okay, so this one follows Sage, who's a very big personality living in a small town who has been convinced her entire life from her ex that she needs to get smaller and smaller and smaller. He ends up leaving her, and she's kind of in the aftermath of trying to figure out what she needs to do in life. Well, a big city chef shows up, and he's trying to reignite his passion for cooking. And they end up settling into a temporary romance that begins to feel like a once-in-a-lifetime. And okay, so just like the last book that I just talked about, this story was incredibly simple. It's small town, everyday, people that you would know in your real life. Very, very simple story, and I don't mean that in an insulting way. I mean that in the best way. It's very relatable, easy to just feel like you were reading the story of one of your friends, like they wrote like a well-written blog post about their lives, and you just got to witness a love story going down. I feel like when I say blog post, that's not enough of a testament to the writing, because the writing, Tara DeWitt's writing is so good. Okay, so I don't want it to sound like that, but I hope you know what I mean. It just feels like you got to sit with a friend for a little while and hear their love story. This book, it's funny because I am the type of person, like, I love to fly through romances. I like those quick-paced, witty books, and it was very witty, but it was a little bit more slow paced than I'm used to, but I ended up enjoying it because the title is Savor It, and that's what it felt like I was savoring the story. My favorite part about this book is I just loved the maturity of the characters. I felt like there was so much insight in this book. I was highlighting so much in my Kindle because there was just so much insightful discussion around topics. I loved how they were openly communicating with one another. The small town setting was great. It was just just a really well-rounded book, and I would definitely recommend it. Okay, the next one. This is another author. Hopefully this is going to be my thing, introducing you guys to authors that are just not talked about enough. I know there's so many books on like Book Talk and Bookstagram that are like the same 10 books being rotated all the time. Hopefully I can introduce you to ones outside of that, because someone needs to talk about this book. This is Failure to Match by Kira Parsi. This is a spicy romance. I gave it a 5-star, and then I gave the spice a 2 out of 5. So this one is a little bit spicier than like your intro to spicy romance. Here's the thing. When I give like a 5-star to a spicy romance, just know I'm not like, it's not the next great American novel or anything, but it, to me, for the genre, was written perfectly for that genre. Hopefully you get what I'm saying. So this one follows Jamie, who works at a matchmaking company, and her coworkers have spent the last 8 months trying to get a match for one of their top clients. However, it seems like he is not interested in a match. He is doing everything possible to make their life harder. So they come up with a very creative way to figure out what's going on, and it kind of backfires. I had my attention completely grabbed like from the second I started reading this. It's like a billionaire romance, but then it also felt cozy somehow. I loved the main female character. I absolutely loved her. I loved her integrity. I loved what she stood for. It felt relatable. It felt genuine. And speaking of genuine, the way the relationship between the two of them progressed in this book felt incredibly genuine. I just found myself smiling ear to ear throughout this entire book. I felt like the plot, there's a lot of very deep moments, and I feel like it was navigated with complete grace. And the background characters were so funny. They were just cracking me up. There was so much witty banter happening, not even just between the love interest, but also during like group texts and during dialogue that was happening during scenes. I will say, like I mentioned, 2 out of 5 on the spice. Just know that I've read like dark romance, so my scale may be adjusted because of that. To some other people, this could have even been a 3 out of 5. There are some riskier explicit scenes happening, so just a note of caution there. But even if you don't like spice and you want to maybe just skim through those scenes, I would recommend it just for the plot itself. All right, another great book was Rope the Moon by Ava Hunter. Another one I don't think gets discussed as much. Ava Hunter is discussed a little bit more, but still not on the level I need her to be discussed. So this one was a 5-star spicy romance for me, and spice level, this one was a little bit less than that last one. It was a 1.5 out of 5. So this one follows Dakota, who had followed her dreams to the big city of owning her own bakery, and then she literally had to watch it go up in flames. So she has to run back to her small town in Montana and return to the man that she left behind. If you are a fan of the show Yellowstone, and you want a little spicy romance twist to it, I would recommend reading this book. This is the second in the Runaway Ranch series from Ava Hunter. The first book was phenomenal and one of my top reads of 2023. I will link that video down below in case you're interested. This was so good. There was suspense, there was romance, there was action, there was drama. There was everything. I loved the pacing on this book more than anything. I was like racing to the finish, but I also didn't want it to end somehow simultaneously. I don't know what was going on there. And I'm just going to say this, okay? There's another series out there for cowboy romance that everybody is absolutely obsessed with. I think this one blows it out of the water. Okay, so if you've enjoyed cowboy romances in the past, please go pick up both of these books. You will not regret it. Okay, the next book that I read is from one of my favorite authors, and this was Fighting Words by R.S. Gray. This one I gave a 4 out of 5 on the stars, 1 out of 5 on the spice. It is a spicy romance book, but she's kind of like intro to spicy. Like her spicy scenes don't take up too much real estate, but they are there. So this one follows Summer, who has spent her entire life disappointing everyone around her, but she is determined not to disappoint her boss. She heads off determined to get one of their reclusive writers to turn in the manuscript that he's been promising for years. Okay, so this one is set in an English cottage. So for that alone, I would recommend reading it because it was just so cozy. I truly felt like the way that she wrote it was like I was sitting there with them in front of the fireplace just watching their story go down. The thing with R.S. Gray is she's very limited when it comes to angst. So you don't have to worry about getting too frustrated with her books. But for me personally, that's why it's not a 5-star, because I just was kind of like missing a little bit of extra drama, if that makes sense. But I absolutely loved the witty banter between the characters, and I loved how their story progressed. I also loved all of the emotion she was bringing out in me. There's like kind of like a family situation going on with the female main character. I felt like more could have been done with that to kind of like get some closure for the readers in that situation. But overall, it's definitely a book that I would recommend. And R.S. Gray is one that I would recommend. If you're looking for one to start with from her, Cold Hearted Boss was my favorite of hers. Okay, the next book is releasing April 1st. So I'm kind of filming ahead of time trying to get my life together. So I think it'll already have released by the time you see this. But I got to read this ahead of time in exchange for an honest review, and this was The Hollow by Kirsten Modulin. It's a thriller, and I gave this one a 3 out of 5 on the stars, 1 out of 5 on the spice. There is some spicy scenes in it. First, let me just say, Kirsten Modulin wrote one of my favorite books in 2023. It's called The Arrangement, so if you're looking for a really good thriller, I would recommend that. This one follows Carmen, who had spent her teenage years in Hunter's Hollow in rural North Carolina. It's a campground, and she hadn't been there in years after suffering a tragedy there. She finally decides to come back to visit her mom, but immediately starts to regret her choice when another girl goes missing. So I was really excited for this one when I saw the premise of it, and even like the cover of the book and all of that, and even like the first couple chapters. I thought it was going to be kind of like one of those bone-chilling thrillers. It's like set in a creepy campground. It's got a hopping timeline where it's a dual timeline where it goes back to when she's like 13 and first moves to Hunter Hollow, and then when she's 30 years old coming back after being gone for almost 10 years. And the old timeline follows her from like the age of 13 all the way up until like late teens, maybe even her early 20s. I usually love dual timelines, but I think there's a challenge with them when it comes to changing the maturity of the same character during different timelines. So the way she was written when she was 13, it felt like she had the same maturity at the age of 30, which doesn't seem reasonable because the person that I was at 13 is not the person that I am today. I struggled with that because I felt like she was incredibly immature during the adult years, and that made me disconnect with the character so much that I just couldn't get into the story. The twist was pretty good, but it wasn't enough to like wow me, and so I don't know, it just ended up not being a complete love for me. Okay, the next book was another spicy romance. This was called You with a View by Jessica Joyce. This one I gave 4.5 stars out of 5 for my rating, and then for spice, I gave it a 1.5 out of 5. I kept having this come up in my Libby like it was available, and I kept putting it off, and now I'm mad at myself. Do you guys do that? If you're not using Libby, you should. Libby is a way to have like an electronic library card. You go to your library, get an actual library card, and then download the Libby app. And then you can actually reserve ebooks and even audiobooks through the Libby app and then send it to your Kindle or whatever device you want to use. Even if you don't have a Kindle, you can download the Kindle app on your phone or your tablet or whatever, and then you can read the items as an ebook. I'm just obsessed. So anyways, Libby kept telling me it was available, and I kept pushing out my hold because you can do that, and now I'm mad at myself. So this one follows Noelle, who's gone through quite a bit in the past year. Her grandmother had passed away, and then she also was laid off from her job, so she's had to move back in with her parents. Well, when she finally gets to a point in her grief where she can feel like she can go through her grandmother's belongings, she finds hints that she actually had a love before their beloved grandfather. And so she's determined to solve the mystery of who this man could be. She sets up a TikTok account and then ends up getting a response from someone who claims that that is his grandfather. It turns out that the commenter is somebody from her past who she hoped to never see again. You guys, this book was, it brought out all of the emotions in me. I didn't expect it because the cover looks very like rom-com vibe, and this one got deep. I loved the characters. I loved the road trip aspect. I felt like the author did such a good job at kind of uncovering layers little by little without frustrating you much. She kind of like teased the story the entire time and was revealing it a little by little. And I thought it was so refreshing the way that it was handled. I love romance books, and I do enjoy spicy scenes, but I felt like this one, the spicy scenes actually took away from the book for me, which is weird to say. It could have been pulled back a little bit and let the story really blossom on its own, because the story was absolutely phenomenal. I absolutely loved it, and I really think that if you're going through a tough time, especially dealing with grief, and you're in a position to be able to read a book on that topic, it could be a very healing book for you. The next book that I read was called Mr. Wrong Number by Lynn Painter. This one is a spicy romance. I gave it a 3.5 star out of 5 for my rating, and then 1 out of 5 for the spice. So this one follows Olivia, who literally just watched her life go up in flames and is forced to move back in with her brother and his best friend. She receives a text from a wrong number and is all of a sudden leaning on a stranger to get herself through those tough times. So this one, the storyline was super cute. It had kind of like You've Got Mail type vibes to it, but I just don't know. I felt like the characters were really irritating, and they felt very hypocritical to me with the way that they handled situations with one another. So I felt like the relationship was super toxic. I just couldn't get past it. So this ended up not being a love for me. There's some really good witty banter in it, but overall it just isn't one that I'd like rush out to read. The next one that I read was called One Last Shot by Betty Cayouette. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly. This one releases May 7th, and this is another one that was sent to me in exchange for an honest review. This one was a spicy romance. I gave it a 2.5 star out of 5, and then for the spice I gave it a 1 out of 5. This one follows Emerson, who is a supermodel who is trying to find a substantial relationship for her life, and she keeps striking out with the guys that she's been dating. Just as she's trying to figure out what her next step should be, a reminder goes off on her phone about a marriage pact that she has with her best friend from high school, Theo. Theo is now an established photographer, and since she's a supermodel, she gets herself on one of his shoots so she can figure out how to make this marriage pact happen. You guys, I don't like dogging books, okay? That's the thing. Like, I would rather share books that I absolutely love and cherish, and I never want to be one giving negative reviews. That's just not my vibe. I unfortunately did not enjoy this book, and it's not one that I could recommend at all. I wanted to like it so bad. The reason why is because there's a book talker, if you will. I follow her on Instagram because I'm not like super active on TikTok. She is a debut author. She loved books so much, and she grew a great following on social media for her book reviews and things like that, and she decided to write a book. And so I really, really wanted to love it. It wasn't executed well. It was a dual timeline, and kind of like the other book that I was talking about where the maturity level felt like it never changed. That's kind of where it fell for me. I didn't get the chemistry between the characters whatsoever, and I didn't enjoy the main female character whatsoever. I think there was some topics that were incredibly heavy, and they were discussed. So there are trigger warnings in this one. She does discuss it at the beginning though, so that's good. I felt like the way she handled those was really well done, and that's why I gave it a 2.5. This next one, you guys, this next book, I don't even feel qualified to give a review on this book, but I'm gonna do my best. This one was called The Women by Kristen Hanna. It's a historical fiction, 5 star. Actually, I don't even think 5 is worthy of it. It's like a 10,000 star. Especially for historical fiction. That is a tough category in my opinion, and I don't just give out 5 stars to anybody, okay? So this one follows Frankie, who's a nursing student during a very, very uncertain time in American history. It's 1965 and the Vietnam War is going on. Her brother is off to war, and she's trying to figure out what to do next with her life when one of his friends tells her some words that stick with her, and that's women can be heroes too. So she signs up for the Army Nurse Corps and heads off to Vietnam to serve herself. Kristen Hanna just stole my breath away with this book. There were so many layers to this book. It wasn't just a historical fiction. There's a little bit of a romance going on. There's a little bit of a coming of age situation happening. I don't know how she does it. She just navigates so many crazy heavy topics, but she does it in such an uplifting and inspiring way. I was just shook to the core with this book. The thing that I walked away from with this book is like a sobering reminder of what tragedies can do to families, and how one family member can handle it a certain way, another family member can handle it a different way, and just the destruction that certain things can cause. It was just very raw, very heart-wrenching. Don't walk into this if you need like a light read, because this one, it's deep. It's a very, very deep book. Like I said, she writes in a way that is incredibly uplifting, incredibly inspiring, and I walked away just remembering that because this is based on a true story, and I just can't help but think that I'm walking among these women, you know, women that did exactly this. So we're walking amongst heroes every single day without even being aware of it. So it was just, the book was just so well done. I would 100% recommend it. If you've read Kristen Hanna before, and if you're curious, I think my rankings for her books would be The Nightingale is still my #1 book of hers. I think The Four Winds would be next, with The Women being a very close third. Like, The Four Winds or The Women could really be interchanged for me. And then I would say The Great Alone is my next one. She's phenomenal. All of those books that I just mentioned are 5 stars for me, but The Nightingale really is my top read for her. The next book that I read is called the ROM Commerce. This one releases June 11th, 2024 from Catherine Center. I was sent this book in exchange for an honest review. This is a romance. It's squeaky clean, so 0 out of 5 on the spice. 5-star read. I'm not kidding you guys. I was obsessed with this book. I was literally 6% in because like your Kindle tells you, and I was sobbing in this book. So this follows Emma, who's an incredibly talented writer who has a dream of being a screenwriter. However, she's the caretaker to her beloved father, and she's had to put her dreams on hold. Well, an opportunity presents itself for her to be able to go spend 6 weeks in LA with one of her writing heroes, and her family forces her to do it. Once she gets to LA though, she realizes that she may be the one teaching him a thing or two. I love Catherine Center. She is a very refreshing writer. She weaves very heavy topics into romantic comedy in a way that it's like she's doing justice to the topic, but also not making it feel too heavy. And this is my favorite one of hers thus far. You have to pre-order this book. It was that good. It's a romantic comedy that I just think just stands out. I don't even know how to explain it. I was obsessed with the main female character, Emma. She's a very secure person. She is the type of person that although she is not meeting what society deems successful in life, she is still so sure of herself and so sure that her voice matters, and she advocates for herself with that voice. And it was just such a refreshing read because I feel like romantic comedies a lot of time, they kind of are like the light and fluffy, awkward, goofy type girl. And Emma is awkward and goofy and quirky and all of that, but she also is sure of herself. And it was just so refreshing to read that because I don't know, I just feel like that's a gap in romances, and Catherine Center nailed it here. The plot was so good. They're screenwriters writing a romantic comedy, and I felt like it was almost like romantic comedies being dissected. You get to be in the evolution of a romantic comedy, and I just thought that was really, really unique and really well done. The book is also incredibly captivating. It's written at a very fast pace, which, as I mentioned before, is my style. This will probably be one of my top 5 romantic comedy picks of all time. Comes out in June. It's going to be the perfect summer read for sure. Okay, so those are all of the books that I read in the month of March. Hopefully I have given you some books to add to your list. Please let me know if there's a book that you've read recently that I should pick up because I'm always looking for my next great read. I hope I delivered whatever you needed when you clicked on that thumbnail. Maybe your next best great read is somewhere in my recommendations. I'll leave a link down below to my top 23 of 2023 books. I also recently gave my top 15 book recommendations overall of the different genres that I read, so I will leave that link down below if you're looking for more book recommendations. If you're new here, I appreciate you checking out this video and giving me a chance. Normally over here, I do grocery hauls, Costco hauls, Sam's Club hauls, meal prep, recipes, things like that, but every so often I like to sprinkle in a little book content because I am obsessed with reading. I appreciate you being here. If you liked my vibe, please feel free to subscribe before you leave. I hope you all have a magical day. Bye.